1998 year in review continues with me, Dan Rock 08, WCW Bash to the Beach coming right at you. There's a lot of shit going down. There's a lot of shit to talk about, but I will talk about and save it all for the very end. Let's start it all off. Bash to the Beach, live from San Diego, California. Raven defeats Saturn in a good match. Saturn no longer part of Raven's flock. He is his own guy. He follows the beat of his own drum. They have this double table spot. Saturn goes up top and is about to squash Raven through a sandwich of tables, basically. Canyon, who revealed himself from being Mortis in a cage match that Raven had with DDP, as I stated before in the Great American Bash review. Canyon saves Raven for some reason and flatlines him onto a chair and tries to get Saturn the victory that way. But I don't know why he saved Raven from getting sandwiched by the tables from Saturn. I guess it's because Saturn and Canyon are both fighting to see who hates Raven more. Whatever. But the Raven flock still intervenes. Scotty Riggs helps Raven get him the Evil and Flow DDT on Saturn, and he picks up the victory. 6 out of 10. Canyon's interference does not help Saturn. He actually hurt Saturn a lot. 6 out of 10. Juventud Guerrero defeats Billy Kidman in Billy Kidman's very first pay-per-view match, solo. And this is a good match, a 7 out of 10. These two would have a much better match, though, September 4th, 1998, episode Nitro, which is a very historic Nitro as well. And I can't wait to watch that one and talk about it when I get to Fall Brawl. Stevie Ray defeats Chavo Guerrero, and I use defeat in quotation marks. See, Chavo Guerrero is very much crazy, and it's all because of this rivalry he's been having with Eddie Guerrero. He's been basically challenging all these people, and then basically submitting so fast just so he can get his hands on Eddie, just so that he can trick Eddie into thinking that he's crazy. So it's like, is Chavo crazy or is he smart? You decide. But anyways, Chavo challenges Stevie Ray. They do this handshake spot. And Stevie Ray, he handshakes him, but Chavo acts like he's squeezing his hand like crazy. And Chavo taps out from a handshake. I have never seen anyone tap out from a handshake, but there you go. Stevie Ray defeats Chavo and whatever, can't really rate it. Eddie Guerrero versus Chavo. Hair versus hair. So Chavo basically threw the match so that way he can save all his energy and everything he can for Eddie Guerrero. Is he crazy or is he smart? You be the judge. Eddie Guerrero defeats Chavo Guerrero in a hair versus hair match in a very fine match. Very good match. 7.5 out of 10. I like this match a lot. They're fighting over scissors. I guess their mamas never told them, hey, don't play with scissors. It's very dangerous. Charles Robinson takes the scissors away from Chavo, and that leaves him vulnerable for a schoolboy victory from Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero, with a schoolboy victory, wins this match. So, usually, when someone loses the match, in a hair versus hair match, no less, they run like hell. Then the babyface stops the heel dead in their tracks. They tie him up, and then they shave him bald. Well, that doesn't happen this time around. Chavo actually begs Eddie and actually pleads him to shave him bald. To the point where Chavo has the clippers and actually starts shaving himself bald. He basically scares Eddie Guerrero off, and Chavo shaves himself bald. Is he crazy or is he smart? I don't fucking know now. Maybe he's both. Chavo Guerrero loses this match and shaves himself bald. I've never seen that happen before, but there you go. 7.5. These next two matches, I'm just going to run through them as fast as I possibly can because they don't really matter. They're just filler. Conan defeats Disco Inferno. 1 out of 10. The Giant defeats Kevin Green. Yes, that Kevin Green from the Carolina Panthers, who's had a couple of matches before. Giant beats him. Enough said. 1 out of 10. 2 out of 10. Not a lot to say. Okay. Chavo, Guerrero, all that good stuff. Chris Jericho moving on to his rivalry with Dean Malenko. Dean Malenko. Okay. So, in the famous Georgia Dome Nitro episode, they had this big confrontation. And there's an agreement going on here that Dean Malenko and Chris Jericho cannot have an altercation with each other. They cannot touch each other. And if they do, the match at Bash the Beach is thrown out. And Dean Malenko would be disqualified. If Chris Jericho touches Dean Malenko, he is no longer the Cruiserweight Champion. Which, this is something that WWF would do later on. But quite frankly, I think they should have did something like this with Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. Have Brock Lesnar, if he touches Roman Reigns, lose the title. If Roman touches Lesnar, he loses his title shot. Instead of doing the tug of war bullshit. Hey, if you don't want your two guys have an altercation, that's one way of doing it. But anyways, they have this agreement that they can't have an altercation. That's fine and dandy. Chris Jericho knows he can piss Dean Malenko off. And no one can piss anybody off more than Chris Jericho. He knows how to piss people off. He's the master of pissing people off. Chris Jericho gets in front of Dean Malenko. He says, you and I, we have a lot of things in common. Your father was a wrestler. My father was a hockey player. Both of our fathers were always on the road, always away from their families. And he says, your father was always alone. And so, have you ever wondered why you and your brother look nothing alike? So basically, he's basically saying that his dad, Boris Malenko, slept around. This pisses Dean Malenko off. And Dean Malenko beats the shit out of Chris Jericho. Not once, but twice. He beats Chris Jericho up after the match he had with Ultimo Dragon that Jericho had in the Georgia Dome. Anyways, Dean Malenko can no longer face Chris Jericho for the Cruiserweight title at Bash at the Beach. His match is now thrown away. It's completely out. He is suspended from wrestling on this show. So that leaves Chris Jericho with an opponent. So he's out there. He has this top hat. He has a cane. J.J. Dillon comes out there. Chris Jericho says, I want you to want me. And J.J. says, you have to put your title on the line. These fans deserve to see a Cruiserweight title match. And he says, this man hasn't wrestled for 6 months. He's been injured. And Jericho thinks he's going to face some sort of enhancement talent. Well, they're in San Diego. And who is a very popular San Diegoan? No, not Ron Burgundy. But out comes Rey Mysterio Jr., back from his long knee injury, one of his many, many left knee injuries that he would sustain over his long, lustrous career. So he comes back, Rey Mysterio gives a big ovation. Later on, since this is Bash at the Beach, and they had sand and surfboards and sand castles, and there's this lifeguard tower. Because I love WCW stages. They always went all the way with their gimmicks. You know, they have Halloween decorations for Halloween Havoc. Fall Brawl was basically like a war zone, a battleground. The Great American Bash was red, white, and blue Americana Frenzy. And then you had Bash the Beach, which was covered in beach gimmick and all that stuff. So Rey Mysterio climbs this lifeguard tower, and he does a hurricanrana onto Jericho off of the big ass sand pile that they have over there. Pretty cool spot. This match is kind of disappointing beside that, though. Not a whole lot to talk about afterwards. Dean Malenko comes out and distracts Chris Jericho. Rey Mysterio reverses the Lion Tamer and gets a schoolboy victory and wins the Cruiserweight title in his hometown of San Diego. 6 out of 10, not their finest match, but Rey Mysterio Jr. winning the Cruiserweight title is pretty cool indeed. 6 out of 10. Booker T defeats Bret Hart via disqualification to retain his television title. Bret Hart is coming off of the heels of the Montreal Screwjob. And if you want to see how big they fucked up Bret Hart, well, this is the epitome of that. Bret Hart should be main eventing pay-per-views and the WCW title. However, I think Bret Hart working with Booker T or working with a Benoit is actually fucking awesome. And actually, that's what Bret Hart really should have done to begin with in WCW. If you're not going to make him your main event star, instead of having him be Hogan's whipping boy, have him be in matches with a Booker T, with a Benoit. Hell, throw Jericho at him, throw Eddie Guerrero at him, throw Rey Mysterio, throw in maybe a Raven, maybe a Saturn. Those guys. That would be pretty cool. So here we go. Booker T, who has been on fire this whole time in WCW. He got done wrestling 2 matches at Super Bowl and 2 matches again with the Great American Bash. He just got off the heels of a massive 8-match best of 7 series with Benoit for said TV title. He's had a lot of string of great matches over the past few months here. So Booker T gets a big rub from beating, even though it's via disqualification, in Bret Hart. Booker T's the man. Bret Hart, he was a shell of him former self anyways. This is a fine match, 6.5 out of 10. Bret Hart attacks Booker T with a steel chair. There's a lot of steel chair spots in this whole show, by the way. Raven and Saturn had steel chair. Guerrero versus Guerrero did. And then here, and of course the main event. So lots of chair stuff. But anyways, Booker T defeats him via disqualification. Bret Hart beats the shit out of him with a chair. Stevie Ray doesn't run down to the ring. He walks down to the ring. Shows you the differences. Geez, I wonder who is the better brother of the two here. You have Stevie Ray, who beat Chavo Guerrero because he shook his hand too hard. And you have Booker T here, who is facing Bret Hart and is having these best of 8 series with Benoit. Geez, I wonder who's going to be the bigger star of the two. Anyways, Stevie Ray helps Booker T, and I use that term loosely. Whatever the fuck. 6.5. Goldberg defeats Curt Hennig. So after the monster victory that he had from the Georgia Dome and winning the WCW title in front of 40,000 people, he faces Curt Hennig. Curt Hennig probably has less of a chance of winning the WCW title than Bruce Beefcake did from beating Hulk Hogan from Starrcade 94. But with that said, let's talk about before this match. Goldberg's on fire here, and that's an understatement. Only Stone Cold Steve Austin is as big or even bigger than Goldberg, and that's debatable. I think Goldberg and Steve Austin is neck and neck at this point. They're neck and neck at the summer of 1998. They're fucking big stars. And so Goldberg wins the title in the Georgia Dome. July 6, 1998, going 1-0-8-0. So I guess he had 3 matches in 6 days. Whatever the fuck. I guess they had a lot of house shows that he was at. But anyways, so it's a very polarizing, very controversial decision, having Goldberg win the title from Hollywood Hogan in July 6th of the Georgia Dome Nitro. Do you put the title on him now, or do you wait until Starrcade or Halloween Havoc? Well, if you remember my 1998 Starrcade review, I told you that Goldberg was starting to get booed. So I think they made the right decision. You got to understand this. They're in the Georgia Dome. Goldberg is as hot as he could ever be. Only Stone Cold Steve Austin is as hot as he is. I'm serious. It's very debatable which one is bigger, which one's better. And if Steve Austin's hotter than him, it's not by much. It's like this. But even so, 40,000 people, the largest audience to ever see a WCW show by far. By far. And you gotta think of this. 5 years earlier, they couldn't even put 400 people in a conventional play in a conventional building in Atlanta, let alone the Georgia Dome 5 years later. They couldn't even do that in 93. But they do it here. And you're in the midst of the Monday Night Wars. July 6th episode of Nitro beat Raw 4.8 to a 4. It's craziness. 11 million, 10 million people watching Raw and Nitro combined. I mean, you gotta put the title on him. What if you waited until Starrcade? Like I said, Starrcade, he was getting booed. Booed. They were chanting Goldberg. So, maybe it was smarter to put the title on him on Nitro instead of a pay-per-view where you drew big money. But still, doesn't matter. Goldberg's the man. He defeats Curt Hennig because, of course, he's going to beat him because Curt Hennig probably had less of a chance to win than Bruce Beefcake did in beating Hogan at Starrcade 94. Goldberg wins in 3 minutes, 4 out of 10. Goldberg is so red hot. The main event time. Hollywood Hogan, Dennis Rodman, DDP, Karl Malone. The biggest main event. One of the biggest main events in WCW history. This is a big main event. And you have Goldberg as the champion. No wonder this pay-per-view drew one of the biggest, actually the biggest, and if it's not the biggest, it's Starrcade 97, pay-per-view buy rates of all time is Bash to the Beach 98. This is a big match. Of course it is. You have Hollywood Hogan, the leader of the NWO Hollywood. You have Diamond Dallas Page, the People's Champion, probably the second or third biggest babyface in WCW behind Sting and Goldberg, of course. DP is very hot. Hogan is still the man, honestly. And then you have Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone. Dennis Rodman is probably the most controversial figure in all of basketball. And Karl Malone is one of the best players in basketball. I'm not the biggest basketball guy, but I know for a fact that Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone has this big rivalry. And I'll let you down on this. The 1998 NBA Finals. It's one of the most famous finals in all of NBA. You had the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman, and all these other guys. They defeat the Utah Jazz for the second year in a row. Karl Malone and all those other guys. And it's Michael Jordan's very last basketball game with the Chicago Bulls. It's a very big game. So, you have that rivalry between Rodman and Malone. So you have Hogan and Rodman, the champions, versus DDP and Malone, the contenders. And this is a bad match, sure. Dennis Rodman, he needs to be in the celebrity wing of the Hall of Fame. He really honestly does. But on this night, he wasn't really his best. If his mission was to keep his bandana on the whole time, he did it because his bandana was kept on his head the whole time, which is kind of disappointing because I wanted to see what kind of hairdo, what kind of fucking hairstyle, and all the fucking colors of the rainbow he had on his hair. His boots were nice. He had Terminator on his boots, and he came. I mean, he may have been out of it even early going of the match, but shit. But Karl Malone, wow, Karl Malone, dude. I don't know how, man, he probably could have been a wrestler, but he knew how to get the crowd into it. He knew what to do. He knew how to do a diamond cutter like crazy. He did a diamond cutter like Karl Malone was really awesome. Dennis Rodman, unfortunately, was not. He kept on falling over all the time. He wrestled like he was drunk. He fucked up a bunch of times, but he knew how to get heat. That's the whole point. It didn't matter that this match sucked. It did its job. 3 out of 10, and that's being generous. I'm probably overrating it, but I don't give a fuck. Hogan and Rodman wins this match because of the disciple, Bruce Beefcake. I never knew that, actually. And they win. After the match, Karl Malone gives a pair of diamond cutters to Rodman and Charles Robinson. And DP and Malone celebrating the crowd, and NWO celebrating the aisleway. And that's Bash to the Beach 98 for you. One of the biggest shows in WCW history. You had the big-ass Nitro in the Georgia Dome where Goldberg became 108-0 and won the WCW World Heavyweight title. It's a pretty big show of events. I mean, let's break it down here. July 6th, 40,000 people in the Georgia Dome. 4.8 Nelson buy rate. Holy shit. 6 days later, Bash at the Beach. WCW gets the biggest buy rate, or the second biggest buy rate behind Starrcade 97 that they ever did in San Diego. Fucking incredible. In just 6 days, look at that. So, the Monday Night Wars is heating up, and it's getting bigger, and it's getting bigger, and it's getting hotter, and it's getting even hotter, and hotter, and hotter, and hotter. My final rating is the exact rating that the July 6th Nitro got, a 4.8 out of 10. I'm Dan Rock 08. 1998 year in review continues with WWF Fully Loaded. And for WCW, I catch you next time for Road Wild. Goodbye.